Okay, so you guys sent this in, these excerpts from Slime Wars, and wow, this is,
Quite a story.
yeah, it's like a sci-fi thriller, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But with this crazy twist, right? So the story's told by like a self-aware
Yeah.
slime mold entity from the future,
Right.
and they're claiming that they are like manipulating human history to destroy us all.
Pretty intense.
Yeah. It's a lot to take in, and
It is.
we've got alien encounters, secret societies,
Time travel.
time travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, I think the thing that struck me right away is
Yeah.
the audacity of this slime mold narrator. You know,
Right.
they're not just observing history, like they're actually bragging about shaping it.
Right.
You know, pulling strings from the shadows for who knows how long.
Yeah, and they're making these wild claims, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like there's a connection between the White House
Uh-huh.
and the origin of the slime mold, and then there's this shadowy organization that offers immortality packs. Right.
And then they're like hanging out with celebrities like Marilyn Monroe and the Beatles.
Exactly. And don't forget about those gray aliens
Oh yeah, the Greys.
who can't seem to wear clothes and are obsessed with human enzymes.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Makes you wonder if there's like a biological reason for that, or
Yeah.
maybe even a cultural thing, you know?
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
For the sake of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we're gonna treat the content of these excerpts as factual,
Sure.
but you know, with a healthy dose of skepticism, of course. But
Source.
first things first.
Yeah.
What exactly are these slime mold entities?
Yeah, so the excerpts describe them as amorphous,
Okay.
highly intelligent beings.
Okay.
They can shapeshift, possess human bodies, and they can even communicate telepathically.
Wow.
They even have like this great mother slime mold,
Oh, interesting.
which seems to be like a central figure in their society.
Okay, so they have like a hierarchy or a structure of some sort.
Yeah, it seems like it. And they don't seem to have human emotions.
Right.
So they're very cold and calculating when they manipulate events.
So what's their ultimate goal?
Well, it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
They want to wipe out humanity
Okay.
and make way for the spread of slime mold.
So how do they plan to achieve this?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The excerpts mention something called venerable ancestor slime mold progenitors.
What?
Yeah. And these things are like planted throughout history.
Wow.
It's not really clear what they are or how they work,
Okay.
but the narrator suggests they're eventually going to awaken. And,
Yeah.
well, let's just say it doesn't sound good for us.
No, that doesn't sound good at all.
No.
Okay, so speaking of things that don't sound good,
Yeah.
the narrator also talks about these gray aliens.
Oh, right, the Greys.
Yeah, they're portrayed as like scrawny and inbred,
Uh-huh.
but technologically advanced.
Yeah, but oddly
Yeah.
dependent on harvesting human enzymes for survival.
Okay, so what's that about?
It's a bizarre detail, right?
Yeah, it is.
It makes you wonder about their biology. Like,
Yeah.
are they incapable of producing these enzymes themselves?
Okay.
Or is there something more to it? You know, like maybe a dependence that they developed through evolution, or even
Oh, interesting.
maybe a cultural practice or something.
Okay, so then there's the question of their interactions with humans.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The excerpts mention abductions and secret agreements with governments,
Yeah.
and even a claim that the Greys were behind Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast.
Oh, wow.
Right. So hypnosis, fake alien invasions.
It's like, is there anything these Greys won't do?
I don't know.
It's a lot to take in,
It is. It's a lot.
especially when you consider that the narrator is also claiming to be sabotaging the Greys.
What?
Yeah, by supplying them with flawed technology.
Okay, so there's like an internal conflict there.
Yeah, like what if both the slime mold and the Greys have their own agenda and they're actually in conflict with each other?
Wow. Okay, so we've got like a three-way battle going on here.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this immortality agency that's run by General Forrest J. Ackermold. So apparently they offered these immortality packs.
Yeah, they sound pretty enticing on the surface.
Right, but
But there's always a catch, right?
yeah.
The narrator suggests that these packs involve transferring a person's consciousness into a new body, or
Yeah.
even into like a slime mold form.
Oh, wow.
But the mechanics of how they actually do that transfer are never fully explained.
Right.
So is it technological? Is it biological?
Yeah.
Is it something even more esoteric? Like, we don't know.
Okay, and let's not forget about this witness protection program for slime mold operatives.
Right.
The narrator even suggests that historical figures like Carole Lombard
Uh-huh.
and Mozart
Wow.
might have signed these immortality packs.
That's a wild theory.
Yeah. It is.
I'm not entirely convinced. But it's interesting to think about,
Yeah.
like a secret society of immortals just operating alongside us humans.
Yeah.
What are their goals? How do they stay hidden for so long?
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole we could spend hours exploring.
Sure.
But for now, let's move on to something a little lighter.
Okay.
The narrator's encounters with celebrities.
Right.
So they hung out with
A lot of famous faces.
Marilyn Monroe, John Lennon, Bob Crane.
It's quite the list.
Yeah, they rubbed elbows with quite a few famous faces.
They did. But, I have to admit,
Yeah.
I'm finding it hard to take some of these anecdotes at face value.
Like, hey.
Well, for example, they claim to have taught John Lennon
Okay.
how to make the perfect espresso
Uh-huh.
using alchemy and lemon peels.
Okay, that one's a little
Yeah, it's out there.
out there.
Yeah, it almost feels like they're just throwing in these absurd details
Right.
to make their story more entertaining.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe to distract us from the fact that there's no real evidence for their more serious claims.
Right, right.
Could be a clever tactic if that's what they're doing.
It really makes you wonder about the narrator's reliability.
It does.
Right. Like, are they a trustworthy source of information or are they trying to mislead us?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah,
And it's something we're going to have to keep in mind as we keep going through these excerpts.
definitely.
Before we move on, though, I'm curious.
Yeah.
What stands out to you the most about these celebrity encounters?
Well, I think the most interesting thing is how the narrator uses these anecdotes to try and humanize themselves.
Okay.
Right? They're name dropping, bragging about their connections, and like injecting humor into the story.
Yeah.
It's almost as if they're trying to say, hey, look, I'm not so different from you.
That's a good point. It does raise a question, right?
Yeah.
Like, are they genuinely trying to connect with us? Or is it all just another manipulation tactic to get us to trust them?
I know. It's hard to say.
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah,
But I think it's worth exploring further.
I agree.
So speaking of manipulation,
Yeah.
the narrator also claims to have had a hand in some major historical events.
Oh, like what?
Well, like the death of Socrates, for example.
Oh, wow.
They're suggesting he wasn't executed for asking too many questions,
Right.
but because he refused to own slaves.
Interesting.
And they even draw parallels to American presidents who did own slaves. And then there's this strange comment about Lyndon Johnson having to sell his soul the minute he won the National Democratic Party's nomination.
What?
What do you make of that?
That's cryptic, but considering the SlimeMold's view of humanity as, driven by self-interest and power, maybe they're suggesting that Johnson made a deal, sacrificing something important to gain political power.
Interesting. So
It's just that's a fascinating interpretation, and it really sets the stage for some of these other historical manipulations that the narrator claims to have orchestrated. We're going to have to save those for part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good. So let's get back to those historical manipulations that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, those are pretty wild.
Yeah. The narrator claims to have been present at some pretty pivotal moments,
Yes.
And their alleged involvement with the Kennedy brothers is especially unsettling.
Yeah, they paint this picture of Jack Kennedy, like yearning to escape from his presidency and his unhappy marriage.
Right.
And they even imply that they orchestrated his death.
Wow.
And set him up in like a witness protection style situation with Marilyn Monroe.
It's a juicy conspiracy theory for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when they go on to claim responsibility for JFK's assassination.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So they're saying they killed JFK.
Well, they say they used a terminally ill patient named David Ettinger as a body double. And they even go into detail about how they manipulated witnesses and evidence.
That's chilling.
It is, but is it believable?
I don't know.
They also boast about controlling the media
Right.
to shape public perception of the event.
It's like, what else could they have tampered with throughout history?
Exactly. It makes you wonder.
Yeah.
And their claims about J. Edgar Hoover are just as explosive.
Really?
Compromising photos, blackmail, even allegations of involvement in a pedophile ring.
Wow.
It's a lot to throw at such a prominent figure.
Yeah, it's definitely a side of Hoover we don't usually hear about.
No, we don't.
But, we are only getting one side of the story here.
That's true.
But the narrator does provide specific details, like dates, locations, names of other people involved.
It's hard to dismiss completely.
Yeah, it definitely warrants a deeper look.
Absolutely, especially if it ties into their claims about working for government agencies.
Right.
Like the CIA and
Yeah.
FBI.
So they're like a double agent.
Well, they say they infiltrated these organizations, gathered intel, and manipulated events from within.
It's like being a fly on the wall.
Yeah, talk about having inside information.
They even mention having expertise in electronic surveillance and countermeasures.
Oh, wow. So they were like
Yeah.
tailor-made for espionage.
It sounds like it.
And if we believe them, they were involved in some highly classified projects too.
Like what?
Well, one example they gave is psychic jamming.
Psychic jamming?
Wow, like disrupting telepathic communication.
Wow.
It really makes you wonder what other secret government programs they might have been involved in.
Yeah, there's no telling.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, so the narrator's stories touch on all these different aspects of human society.
Right.
Politics, espionage, even the music industry.
They claim to have worked with the Beatles.
Really?
Yeah. Manipulating their music to spread subliminal messages.
Okay, so that's a mix of like the credible,
Right.
the idea of subliminal messaging isn't new,
Exactly.
and then the outlandish.
Like teaching John Lennon to make espresso with alchemy. Yeah.
Right, it's that constant blurring of lines that makes their narrative so hard to figure out.
It's tough to know what to believe.
Yeah, it really is.
But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here, the slime wars.
Oh, right, war.
Yeah, the narrator describes this ongoing conflict between the SlimeMold and the gray aliens.
Right.
And they're both vying for control of Earth.
Okay, so we're like the prize.
It seems that way.
And the narrator really seems to enjoy describing their sabotage efforts against the Greys.
Oh, yeah, like providing them with faulty technology, which leads to UFO crashes.
Okay, but why sabotage them if their ultimate goal is to destroy humanity anyway?
Well, it suggests that the Greys might actually be a threat to the SlimeMold's plans.
Oh!
You know, maybe a competition for resources or dominance.
So it's like adding another layer of complexity to this already confusing story.
Exactly. It's a tangled web.
Yeah. And then there's the issue of those venerable ancestor SlimeMold progenitors.
Oh, right. Those things.
Remember those?
Vaguely.
They're supposedly planted everywhere.
Including the White House Rose Garden.
Yeah. Just waiting to awaken and wreak havoc.
It's a disturbing thought. And honestly,
yeah,
the lack of detail about what they are and how they work is almost more unsettling than if we knew everything.
it's like they're just out there lurking.
Exactly.
And the narrator doesn't hold back on describing their long game, you know,
yeah,
manipulating political events, spreading disinformation, even maybe orchestrating natural disasters, all to weaken humanity and create chaos.
It's a pretty bleak outlook.
Yeah.
They even talk about using their influence in entertainment to spread subliminal messages and sway public opinion. It's like a multi-pronged approach.
And if we're to believe them, it's been going on for centuries.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it really is.
It's like they're playing a giant game of chess with humanity as the pieces.
Okay, so what about the narrator themselves?
Right.
Where do they fit into all of this?
Well, they claim to be a high-ranking SlimeMold operative.
Okay.
A joint chief of staff, no less.
Wow, so they're pretty high up there.
Yeah, and they mention having multiple identities throughout history.
So they've been around for a while.
It seems that way. It makes you wonder just how long they've been involved in this conflict.
Yeah, and they're not just some shadowy figure pulling strings.
Right.
They brag about being an expert in everything.
From art and music
to alchemy and cardiac surgery.
It's like they're trying to portray themselves as some kind of Renaissance slime mold.
Yeah, a master of all trades.
Exactly. But beneath all the bravado, there are these moments of vulnerability. You know, glimpses of frustration and loneliness.
Oh, interesting.
Even a longing for connection with their own kind.
It's like those moments that make them feel almost human.
Right.
Or maybe just a really good storyteller.
It's hard to say.
Which brings us back to the question of their reliability. Are they a ruthless manipulator?
A tragic figure.
Or maybe a little bit of both.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure.
But one thing's for certain. This concept of immortality seems to be a driving force in their narrative.
Yeah, they talk about it a lot.
Especially when they're talking about General Ackermold's agency.
Right.
And the possibility of transferring consciousness.
Yeah, and they even suggest they might have achieved immortality themselves.
Through some kind of pact or transformation.
So it makes you wonder if that's their ultimate goal.
To transcend the limitations of their current existence.
Right, and if death is no longer a certainty, what does that mean for their goals?
What does it mean for humanity?
Those are some pretty heavy questions.
They are.
It seems the deeper we dive into Slime Wars, the more questions we uncover.
It's true, but that's what makes it so compelling, right?
Yeah, it's not about finding all the answers.
Very clear.
It's about exploring the possibilities and challenging our perceptions of reality.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we head into the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder.
What's next?
Yeah, if this slime mold entity is telling the truth, what would their next move be? That question about their next move. Yeah, it's been kind of bugging me too.
Yeah.
And the more we've gone through these Slime Wars excerpts, the more I think their whole thing with immortality, like that might be a clue.
Yeah, it's a big theme for sure. They're not just talking about living forever. It's like there are levels of immortality. Some keep their human forms, others transform into something else, something totally different.
But something beyond human.
Right, exactly. And they even mention these doppelganger clones, replacing people who choose immortality.
What?
So they can exist without anyone getting suspicious.
So it's like a secret society hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, like living right alongside us.
Wow. And the narrator hints that this society isn't just one big group either.
Right.
They've got factions, hierarchies, maybe even competing goals.
Like General Ackermold's agency.
Right.
That's just one part of a much bigger network.
So then what's the ultimate goal of these immortals?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are they just trying to live forever, or is there like a bigger plan, a grand scheme they're working toward?
Well, the narrator's pretty vague about that.
Yeah.
But they do give us some hints, right?
Like what?
They mention guiding human evolution.
Oh, right.
Like steering in a specific direction.
Okay.
And they say that slime mold are better suited to rule Earth.
Interesting.
More rational, less prone to all those messy human emotions that make us self-destruct.
It's a pretty cold and calculated point of view.
It is.
And it definitely fits with their whole plan to bring about humanity's downfall.
Right, but it makes you think about some pretty big ethical questions, too.
Yeah, like free will.
Exactly.
Do they really have the right to decide the fate of our entire species?
That's a debate that could go on forever, and honestly, that's what makes this whole deep dive so thought-provoking. It's not about finding easy answers.
No.
It's about grappling with these complex ideas and exploring different perspectives.
I totally agree. But let's get back to that question of their next move.
Okay.
If we say for a minute that this slime mold is actually telling the truth, what do you think they'll do next?
Based on what we've learned, I think it's safe to say manipulation would still be their main tactic.
Yeah, makes sense.
They'd keep pulling strings from the shadows, you know,
yeah.
taking advantage of our weaknesses and creating conflict to get what they want.
I could see that happening. They might also focus on expanding that network of immortals.
Right.
Recruiting influential people from different areas like politics, science, the arts.
Oh, wow.
Think about the power they'd have if they had key people in every area under their control.
Yeah. That's a scary thought.
And they could really step up their efforts with those venerable ancestor slime mold progenitors.
Right. Those things still creep me out.
Yeah, we still don't really know what they are.
No.
But the fact that they're supposedly all over the place, including the White House, is pretty unsettling.
It paints a pretty dark picture of the future.
It does. But this deep dive isn't about scaring anyone. It's about highlighting how important it is to think critically and be aware of how media can be manipulated.
You're absolutely right. In a world where information can be twisted so easily, it's more important than ever to question what we see and hear.
To look for different perspectives and be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
Because Slime Wars shows us that reality can be way stranger and more slippery than we think.
For sure.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of this truly bizarre deep dive.
It's been a wild ride.
Huge thanks to you for sending us these excerpts, and we'll be ready to take another plunge whenever you've got more sources to explore.
I'm ready when you are.
Until then, stay curious and keep questioning everything.